Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animation not made by the mouse. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias, and I just want to point out that this week I am doing a movie that is essentially a follow-up to the last video that I did. You don't have to go watch that video to understand what I'm talking about, but for the most part, this is the first time in a while, if not ever, where I feel like one video led into another. Because realistically, I had no plans of doing this movie until I started thinking about what I had said in the last episode, which, for those of you who are just coming into this without knowing, last episode I talked about the Amazing Digital Circus. This episode is focused on one of the influences to that, which is Raggedy Ann and Andy, A Musical Adventure. Before we get started, I just want to say, if you're listening to this on YouTube, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, feel free to comment, and ring the bell for notifications. Also, if you're on Spotify or just any other podcast site, follow this show on those platforms. Now, a lot of you have probably never seen this movie, and that is very understandable. This is not a movie that is widely available. You could technically find it on YouTube fairly easily. That's what I did. And I just want to give a shout out to, I believe his name is Garrett Gilchrist. If I got that wrong, I do apologize. But basically, this guy essentially restored this movie that I wouldn't say has ever been lost, but it's never been really available for a lot of people to watch. I believe this thing has, before any of this, run in some channels, especially in the Disney Channel during its early days. But for the most part, it's not something that's ever been released physically. And as a result, it's something that has a bit of a cult status because there are people who are aware of it, especially who are into animation. They just, again, have no way to really share this with everyone so easily. Now, again, yes, it is on YouTube, so you can actually find it fairly easily. But, of course, that's something where you'd have to look out for it because it's not like your Shreks or your Sleeping Beauties or whatever, where you could just be like, oh yeah, you can watch it on this streaming service, you can buy it on DVD, and it's regularly shown. It's not something that is popular among people. And it's fairly understandable why. This is a very weird movie. This is... Yeah, no, there's no way around it. This is an insanely weird movie. It's not even something that I'd really call a good movie, even though I kind of recommend it, but only on the basis that if you are into animation, this is going to be a lot of fun. If you are into weird movies, you at least will get something out of it. Even if you're not into it, you'll probably remember it just because it is such a bizarre movie to talk about. This was directed by Richard Williams. If that name doesn't sound familiar to you, he was probably most famous for providing the animation for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He did a bunch of jobs just because he was trying to fund what essentially was going to be his magnum opus, The Thief and the Cobbler, which is a movie I've never talked about on here. I think I've mentioned it here and there, but never fully talked about it. For the most part, that's a whole other story, but it's a pretty amazing movie, more so for the animation than the actual story. But I do think that one's at least a little more interesting than this one in that regard. But still, this is a movie that he essentially made to get funding for that movie. And I gotta be honest, for a movie that essentially just existed as a paycheck, it is much more interesting than most paycheck movies. Because, a lot of those are often just like, okay, let's do the safest, most generic kind of story. This is truly something bizarre. This is a movie that essentially feels like it's the earliest version that I can think of Toy Story. In terms of, this movie came out in the 70s, and the whole basis of it is that Raggedy Ann and Andy are, of course, actual toys. There's other toys in the playroom. They're owned by this little girl who's played by Richard Williams' daughter. That part of the movie is live action whenever you see the little girl. But when it comes to the toys themselves moving, that's all animated. And she gets a new toy, this French doll named Babette, who essentially gets kidnapped by a pirate that was inside of a little globe that she had, like a snow globe, because the pirate captain is in love with her, and he takes her out of the bedroom. As a result, Raggedy Ann and Andy decide that they had to go rescue her, so they had to leave the bedroom, which is dangerous because they're toys, and shit happens. I am only barely joking when I say shit happens, because this movie just kind of goes all over the place. There's a whole thing with this greedy monster. I called it the Gloop, but it's called the Greedy. I don't know, maybe Gloop was the name of the one from The Amazing Digital Circus. I don't know. Point being is that the character's name is the Greedy, and it's like this whole monster made up of sweets, chocolates, and all this stuff, who just wants its sweetheart, as he puts it, and he sings about it, and it's a very trippy sequence. They encounter people who just want to do practical jokes on them because their king only grows in size when he laughs, but he's always very tiny. He almost looks like one of the trolls from like the DreamWorks troll movies, which is funny to me because those are supposed to be based on troll dolls, but the redesigns they did looks more like the troll, like the little king from this movie. And that's pretty much what it is. Like, you know, there's a whole thing where they meet this camel who constantly has visions of other camels roaming around, and he's like this old forgotten toy, but they befriend him, and I don't know, man. It's a weird movie. I mean, it takes nearly 30 minutes for them to actually get the plot going, and this is a movie that only lasts for like an hour and 20 minutes or so, not including the credits. So it's already very bizarre because it's like taking its sweet ass time to get to whatever it's doing, but that's because there's always singing. The fact that this is called Musical Adventure is not like some cutesy name. It is very much a musical adventure. It reminded me of Cats, where it's like every single time a character shuts up, you can't even enjoy that silence for too long because almost instantly another song will come on. It's only until really like towards the end when they start calming down and it's like the songs are placed a little more sparingly. But for like the first almost 50 minutes or so, it's like it's constantly song. And it's just annoying. Because, okay, in fairness, the songs aren't bad. But it does get to a point where it's like, man, what the fuck are they doing? They're just singing and singing. They're talking about how, you know, Andy is all like, oh, I'm not a girl's toy, I'm a boy, even though he's clearly a girl's toy, and they're going all off, and I don't know, it's just all this stuff that's going on with this movie, and a lot of it just feels like, what is even the point in this? I genuinely cannot tell you what the point in any of this is. But again, the story eventually does pick up and you eventually get like, okay, well, this is what it was all building up to. I will say the twist towards the end, and I'm not even going to bother hiding it, even though, again, a lot of you have probably never watched it. If you were really that interested in not being spoiled, I would recommend just stopping the video here, going off and looking up Raggedy Ann and Andy, A Musical Adventure. You're going to find the whole movie on YouTube. Trust me. But if it doesn't matter to you, the big twist towards the end is that Babette, the French doll that was kidnapped, ended up overtaking the captain's ship, pretty much causing a mutiny. So he's like, locked up in the brig, and she's like the new captain because she wants to go back to France, and that's kind of hinted at the beginning. So it's like, okay, that's kind of an interesting twist, but it's like so much of the movie is just dragging itself out just to get there. I just did not care, and yet I didn't really hate it. This is not a movie that is new to me. I have seen it before, but the last time I saw it was maybe 15 or so years ago. It's been a long time. I remember hearing about it back like around 2009, 2010. So it's definitely been a long time since I saw this movie. Even then, I was like, okay, this is still a worthwhile movie to watch because of the animation. And it's because of that I truly do understand why some animation fans love the hell out of this movie. I don't agree with them. I don't think it's, it's a top tier animation. I don't think it's something that I would say like, hey, you have to watch this right away. But I will say that if you are into animation, and I don't mean just like, oh, you like cartoons, like you actually like the way things move, you actually think about the way the characters are designed, you think about just the coloring and all that stuff, like you can appreciate the details of animation, you will find value in this movie. Whether it's just being mesmerized by the animation or just getting inspiration from the way everything is done. This is one of those movies that, plot-wise, do not recommend. A lot of people will probably agree with me. I know some people will say that they love the weirdness in it, which is perfectly fine. It is very memorable in how weird it is. Like I said, there's a whole thing with a camel constantly chasing after other camels that he sees in his mind. The whole thing with the Greedy is, just a memorable sequence of like, hey, we're trying to get out of this candy monster, but the monster just keeps on trying to drag us back because he wants Raggedy Ann's candy heart, whatever. But for me, it's definitely something where it's like, it does make it a struggle to get through, and if you're not into animation, like you don't really think too much about the way things are done, like the details, you're probably going to be better off skipping it, just because I'll admit, among the movies that I have watched for this show, this was one of the hardest ones to get through properly, just because towards the end, I want to say right after they encounter the king that laughs, that grows when he laughs, I started nodding off. And that could be just me being tired and whatnot. I'm not going to rule that out. But at the same time, the fact that I was constantly just falling asleep and had to essentially play back those last 20 minutes of the movie at least 3 times just so I could properly watch it all the way through really emphasized to me that, like, yeah, I am kind of bored of this movie. It's beautiful. I really like it. And I think a lot of the weird stuff in it has influenced stuff that I've drawn, even though I wouldn't say I'm a great artist when it comes to drawing, but I have drawn like a lot of weird stuff that, is kind of like those weird people that started mocking them in the later half of the movie. It's a very beautiful movie to watch. Like the way the characters move, the fluidity of it, just the overall designs is amazing. Some of it is creepy. There's a whole thing early on where you see like the different toys in the room, and among them there's these like little twin girl dolls who always sing every time they pop up, and they're always just like, oh, Raggedy Ann, what are you doing? Raggedy Ann, what are you doing? Oh, this thing happened. And they always creep me out. So I cannot pretend that, it's all just cute and amazing. It's definitely nightmare fuel. And I will say this much. If you must watch this and you're not a big animation fan, maybe watch it with weed or something else on hand, like something that makes you not sober, and you might get something out of it, because there are some weird ass visuals in this, and there's some weird ass choices with the characters that I imagine people watching this will have fun with it if they're not sober. Still, it is a masterclass of animation. If you show this to someone who's trying to get into hand-drawn animation, they'd probably get a whole lot of ideas just by what they say, whether it's by trying to recreate it or just build off of it. Richard Williams was definitely one of the greats when it came to animating stuff, and you can see it on full display here, which is amazing. The fact that even when he was just cashing in, he gave it 100% is admirable. I'm not gonna lie, it's admirable to a point that I'm like, it is nice that someone has restored it, and again, shout out to Garrett Gilchrist. I hope I got that right. But I will say that as an animation fan, I would love to see Criterion or one of those DVD labels that focuses on releasing stuff that just does not get a lot of attention or love, would take this and just properly release it, because I do feel like this is something that for animation fans, you should probably consider watching it, just to see the amount of detail and effort that went into this bizarre movie. And I really can't pretend that I don't see the appeal for those who are more into it. I mean, it's very much like how I feel about Transformers the movie, where it's like, yeah, it's very much a mess. It's very much kind of all over the place, and under normal circumstances, this is probably not a movie that I would ever recommend to anyone, but given the mixture of what it offers, it almost feels like it's mandatory, and it's just much more interesting. I'm personally, I am much more of a fan of Transformers the movie, because it's something that is much more deep and personal to me, but I feel like the way I feel like about that would be how some of the people who love this movie probably feel about this. So I totally get it. It is, I mean, at its worst, it's just a bad movie. It's pretty much a movie that is just random. Things are just kind of happening, and it probably goes on a little too long just because things are just being dragged around. But when it shines, it's definitely well worth it. Again, just the animation on any of the characters is amazing. Just seeing the way they move, the coloring. There's a very, I don't want to say trashy look to it, but I don't know, like, since it's, this is a movie from the 70s, so like the way the colors and the designs kind of mesh, it's almost like as cutesy as it is, and it's clearly something that you could easily imagine putting on for a kid with no knowledge of what it has, but the way it looks like at times feels like something that was made more for adults. Like it almost reminds me of stuff like Heavy Metal or Fritz the Cat, or I don't know, like the way the designs and the coloring, comes together. It just feels like this almost feels like something that should be watched by older viewers. But it isn't. It's, of course, just something that was intended to be a kid's movie, and for the most part, you can see how a kid might like this, even if it's weird. That stuff, of course, will traumatize a kid, but in the same way that something like Pink Elephants from Dumbo would traumatize a kid. Not so much like a horror movie or anything like that. It's just one long bizarre trip, and for those who are curious, I would say watch it. If you're an animation fan, watch it. If you're at all curious by anything I've said, look up some clips and see if it grabs your curiosity. You'll probably enjoy it. If you're, of course, not sober, you can definitely enjoy it. But if somehow you don't land on any of those, you can skip it. I'm not going to pretend that it's a great movie, because it does have a lot of flaws in the story, or lack thereof. The music in it is, while not awful, it's not also very good. It's pretty much just the kind of music that perfectly fits with whatever they're trying to do. Yeah, Raggedy Ann and Andy, A Musical Adventure. I think it's not a good movie. It's not a well-told movie. It's not it's a movie with catchy songs, but nothing that's really all that good. For the most part, by the time the story gets to its end, you just kind of feel like you were in a long, slow ride, just because a lot of it just feels like it's being padded out by the music or just by weird nonsense that has nothing to do with whatever's going on. But it is amazing to watch. It is a trip to witness. As such, I do get the appeal from people who are much more positive towards it. I would recommend it on those terms, and I would recommend that you give it a shot, just because it is such a bizarre movie that even if I tell you all of this stuff, you might have something completely different from your experience once you get there. With all that out of the way, I just want to say thank you for listening, and I'll see you again next time.
What's in the box? What's in the box? Gotta find out what's in the box.
Thanks for stopping by. Go ahead and follow this channel. Subscribe, like, and comment. Ring the bell for notifications. Go ahead and also follow my podcast, and give some love to my Patreon account while you're at it. It's www.patreon.com/psycams. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you come back for more in the future.